Hi there, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm talking about something I'm sure you have dealt with at some point, staying motivated as an artist, especially when you're working on long-term projects or goals like developing your sketching skills. In a previous video, I touched on motivation and why it's not something we can always rely on. And today, as you watch me sketch through some gesture drawings and some dynamic poses, I'll dive deeper into how I managed to keep up a regular sketching habit even when that motivation disappears. Motivation is tricky. It's great at the start of something new. It's that spark, that burst of energy that gets you to sit down and start drawing. Maybe you got a fun idea, or you've seen some art online that really inspires you. And in those moments, motivation is your best friend. But here's the thing, motivation doesn't last. It's unreliable. The same feeling that gets you to start can just as quickly fade when the project starts to feel a lot more like work. I've had days where I sat down to sketch, all fired up, and then just after 10 minutes, I lose steam because I realize how much more I still need to do. Whether there's a ton of more detail I need to add to sketch, or I come across a shape or perspective that's really challenging, but in a way that feels like a roadblock rather than exhilarating, you can start to feel overwhelmed by the scope of the work, and then suddenly, that motivation that got you to sit down, nowhere to be found. Motivation can vanish for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest challenges is feeling overwhelmed. When you start sketching a complex pose or a tricky gesture, it can feel like you can never get it right. That's when the doubt starts to creep in. What if this drawing doesn't turn out well? Or, well, I'm not proving fast enough? Or, oh my god, this is going to take way more time than I originally thought. On top of that, life changes. Your priorities shift. Maybe a new project comes up, or life just gets in the way. The initial excitement starts to wear off, and you find yourself avoiding the sketch pad altogether. I've been there plenty of times, but over the years, I've learned that relying solely on motivation isn't the answer. So, if motivation isn't reliable, then what do we turn to? For me, it's all about setting your own strategies and having your own discipline. It may not sound as exciting, but honestly, this is what keeps me going when I don't have any motivation or inspiration behind me. One trick I use is setting up timing. What I mean by that is I'll set up intervals with breaks. Like, I'll draw for 10 to 15 minutes at a time, followed by a short break. This helps me stay productive without feeling overwhelmed. This is something that I do not only with my drawing, but just with work in general, just albeit with different intervals. Another tip is documenting your process. This is pretty easy as artists because we can see our sketches are as the output of our process. But I like to record my sketches for time-lapse, just as you're seeing right now. It's a great way for me to not only track my progress in terms of having the sketches as my output, but I just being able to replay it for videos like this, reveal certain habits or mistakes, or potentially inspire me to tackle a new sketch in a completely different way. If you picked up on anything, I've mentioned the idea of setting strategies and discipline. And one thing you can compare that to is going to the gym. And when you talk to a gym trainer, they're going to talk about those same sort of ideas, those same sort of principles. When you go to the gym for the first time, you're starting out with a pretty high level of motivation, right? You want to get in shape, you go to the gym, and you go really hard for maybe the first couple of times that you go. But despite it feeling great, your motivation dies down. Again, for the same reasons that we talked about. Sometimes you might run into a wall and all of a sudden it feels hard and less enjoyable. Or your life gets in the way and disrupts your routine so that it's therefore a little bit harder to get back into the schedule that you had set up. Sketching, like exercise, needs to be sustainable. That's why I focus on steady progress over time, rather than pushing myself to the limit in every session that I do. It's about building that routine, building that habit, and treating it as something that you must be doing, or as something that's naturally a part of your day, as brushing your teeth. One of the most important things to do is to set realistic goals for each of your drawing sessions. In the past, I've talked about not putting a lot of pressure on your output when you're sketching. However, it is a good idea to have some sort of rough goals or some rough frameworks for you when you're doing your sketching. For example, today I'm just focusing on doing some poses for humanoid figures, and if I have like an idea for like a dragon or a weird animal, I'll do those too. So I'll have my rough framework, but I'm not afraid to go outside of that, just so I'm enjoying the process and I'm reinforcing that habit. I don't need to have a fully finished polished illustration. By keeping the goal simple, I avoid feeling overwhelmed and I keep my energy for the next session. I also like to write down my tasks on a whiteboard or an app. I use TickTick for myself, for example. It's a small thing, but having a clear plan helps me keep on track. I can check off sketch rough poses or finish gesture study, and that's a huge win. Even though it's going to be part of my routine, it's part of the same things I do every morning, checking that off is very satisfying and it feels that I've accomplished that. After that, I stop. It's important to pace yourself, especially when you're working on long-term goals like improvements. Being able to set breaks, to walk away from your sketch pad or your drawing tablet, that's just as important as setting aside time to actually draw. One thing that's crucial, and I'm sure you guys have felt this in the past before in your own sketching, is hitting that flow state. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's that moment when everything's clicked, you're fully immersed in what you're doing. And it doesn't happen right away. For me, it takes at least 10 to 15 minutes until I feel fully warmed up and I'm completely focused on what I'm sketching. At first, I might not feel like drawing at all. Actually, that first pose on a blank piece of paper is really difficult to get through. But once I push through that initial resistance, the sketching starts to flow naturally. I've talked about how I will use reference for the first couple of poses just to help me get over that hump, and then I'll switch to completely freehand drawing. That's a technique that you can use yourself. What's important is that you don't let those first initial sketches deter you or make you not want to complete a sketching session. Stick to the time that you set aside for yourself, and again, make sure that you're forming a habit out of this. So, what's the takeaway from all this? Motivation is a great way to start, but it's not something you can depend on, especially in the long term. The real key to improvement and consistency is building habits and discipline. Treat your sketching practice like going to the gym. Pace yourself, set realistic goals, and remember that it's okay to set some time off. If you're struggling to stay motivated or finding it hard to keep up with your sketching, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear about how you're pushing through, and maybe we can help each other out. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep drawing.